all right. We finally, I don't know, I've been sitting in this room for an extra 20 minutes figuring out these screens and these lights and these backgrounds. Unauthorized opinions. You like that? I like it. It's about as catchy as one could hope it is. And we're all situated. Last week we had, I was working with different screens. Didn't know what I was doing. Mom Spaghetti in the background. White House in the background. Ninja Turtles in the background. And it's all roses. It's all coming up peaches. I don't know what the phrase is. A lot of people are praising Mark Zuckerberg this week, but he's also getting a good amount of backlash, as he should. The Zuck, of course, going on Joe Rogan, talking about his policy changes and talking about how the Biden administration pressured him into taking things down. He's innocent, you guys. He didn't want to do it. He said no. Apparently, he said no. I don't know where you guys were. I don't know where I was when he said no to all this stuff about censorship for 8 years. Specifically, starting in 2019 is when they really hammered down. We went through a good 5 years of mass censorship on social media platforms to varying degrees. People say TikTok isn't censored. Of course it's censored. X, there's been some censorship, especially as of late. And, ever since he brought in that Linda Yaccarino girl, Elon Musk, who they said you can't get certain things seen if they're too mean. Facebook, obviously, always worse. Instagram, always worse. Now, Zuckerberg has come out, changed a bunch of policies. We're going to go through that. But I also want to go through some stuff that he said and some stuff that we've seen from him before. Now, people are going to come out and, harp on him even worse on Twitter because they want to impress Elon. That's a fact. But there are some people who, don't trust him, rightfully so. One of those people is Tim Pool. We're going to bring that video up here and show you exactly what Tim says.
Buying the Zuckerberg transition?
I'm buying that he's a fair weather friend and that this is the path of least resistance. But hey, look, we're happy Trump won, so I'll take the power if he's shifting in this direction. But I think when you look at the Joe Rogan podcast and he talks about, they're yelling at us and they're forcing us to do these things. This only scratches the surface. Facebook built a portal for feds.
Maybe we should do this the other way around. Maybe we should show you a clip of what Zuckerberg said first, because it'll give a bit more context. So Zuckerberg changes all these rules. Let's do it in this order. Why don't we? I'll show you the rule changes. You can decide if you believe them, and then we'll hear what he had to say, because these rule changes came first, and then you can decide afterwards if you believe what he's saying, and then if you agree with Tim Pool. So Meta said it will allow allegations of mental illness regarding transgenderism under its new policy of community guidelines. So let's read through. I tried to be fair. I summarized as best as I could. Meta's new community standards for hateful conduct will allow criticisms of the mental state of those who claim to be transgender. The rule changes come after founder Mark Zuckerberg announced sweeping changes to Meta's approach to moderation, saying that the company had reached a point where there had been too many mistakes resulting in censorship. So if you didn't see that, we can bring that up for you. But basically what he said was, we're going to move people to Texas from California, our moderation team. We're going to bring Dana White, president of the UFC, on board to now, make things a little bit, maybe seemingly more fair, maybe more fair as a show of good faith. I don't know. And we're also going to stop fact-checking. We're going to move it to a community notes thing, similar to what Elon does on X, of course. So that's where that came from. But then I took a bit of a deeper dive into these actual rules, because this was getting circulated online, where it said you can criticize, transgenderism now. You can criticize gender ideology. Zuckerberg said in a video from last week, even if our filters accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And he wanted to allow much more discourse on political and religious grounds. So under the new update to the policy rationale for hateful conduct, this is where they decide what's mean, what can be said, what's harassment, that sort of thing, which really should just be the law, right? If you truly want a free speech platform, the rule should be, this is the law, nothing is censored, block it if you don't like it, mute it if you don't like it. The market will decide. And this argument people have about, even on YouTube or on X now, this was the argument always on YouTube as well. You know, advertisers don't want their Coca-Cola ad to be shown in some this is the rationale at the time, some alt-right commentators' videos. We don't want Coca-Cola. They always use Coca-Cola. They don't want Coca-Cola to appear in an ad or in the middle of a video or before or after a video for a person they disagree with. I don't think anybody believes that. I don't think anybody agrees with that. That is the methodology Twitter or X now uses, that advertiser stuff should not and will not appear against hateful conduct, whatever that means. But nobody cares about that, obviously. You're watching a video of Tim Pool and you hate Tim Pool, and then a Coca-Cola, you get this terrible YouTube break of 30 seconds, 55 seconds now or whatever, and you see an ad for Noodle Company Y. You don't say, and no rational and reasonable person says, Noodle Company Y must support this. This is backwards, boomer-esque, terrestrial radio thinking, as if YouTube said, hey, do you want to put your ads next to Tim Pool? And they said yes. That's not how it works on YouTube. You can request that, but in general, nobody chooses. Like, you could have a deal with the NFL on YouTube and put ads in there, right? But nobody chooses where to put their ads online like this on social media platforms. It just says, hey, target these people. It has nothing to do with what content is being watched or read at the time. Nobody cares about that. So if you go on to a YouTube video and there's an ad for Pierre Poilievre in Canada or Trump, does that mean that Trump endorses, Powerpuff Girls? I don't know, G.I. Joes, whatever it might be? No, it does not. And I think that almost all people don't make that connection. They don't say, because I saw this ad while I was watching this video, that person must support this. I don't think anybody supports that. So this is what they've done on X, and, this is how they do this sort of rationale. I forget where I was going with that at the beginning. But Meta still removes dehumanizing speech, allegations of serious immorality or criminality, and slurs, they said in their new rules. If I can find my mouse cursor here, which I for some reason cannot. There we go. The company continued, we will also remove harmful stereotypes, which we define as dehumanizing comparisons that have historically been used to attack, intimidate, or exclude specific groups, and that are often linked with offline violence. So that was my point. You should be able to just make the rules that anything illegal is stuff that can't be allowed on the platform. You can't sell drugs. You can't threaten to kill somebody, all that sort of stuff, and let the people decide, not just by, where we want advertisements to appear. So Facebook and Meta are still going to do that stuff. They're still going to censor you if they think you're being mean, if you're exclusionary, if you're being racist, if you're not saying My Little Pony guys, if you're calling them weirdos. You can't call a group certain names. So, folks at home, we're getting tired of these tech overlords coming into our country. Like, the mouse moves behind us, then it moves past us, and we don't know where it's gone. There it is again. However, under the section that deals with targeting other Meta users due to their characteristics, Meta said it will protect against political exclusion, which means denying the right to political participation or arguing for incarceration or denial of political rights. So I don't know if that's new, but that was put in here, whereas you can't just say, no MAGA people should be allowed to do this, and these maggots, these J6ers should go to jail. You can't say that. I'm not sure if that was in there before, but it's definitely in there now. And you'll start to notice as I keep reading through these that a lot of these things seem like they were plucked out of the air, out of the political discourse du jour of the day of the time, and put into Meta's rules. They didn't take out any of the, free speech limitations, in my opinion, that they have on there, like not being able to be mean. It can easily all be summarized down to you can't be mean. But it seems like they've plucked certain things and put it in there. The rule continues, stating that that insulting people for their inherent intellectual capacity is not allowed, but allegations of mental illness in regard to sexual orientation will be allowed. It says, we do allow the allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation and sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality and common non-serious usage of the word like weird. So the fact that they even have to specify the word weird shows you what we're dealing with here. Is you can't call something weird, and people who will freak out about this need to be told by Meta and Mark Zuckerberg. People who are calling things weird, it's not the end of the world. The platform will also allow content that argues for gender-based limitations, including them in military and teaching. It says, quote, we allow content arguing for gender-based limitations of military, law enforcement, and teaching jobs. We also allow the same content based on sexual orientation when the content is based in religious beliefs. Now, that's a little weird, that they will say you can only argue for the exclusion of things of people based on their gender if it's on religious grounds. Why can't I just argue that as a point of intellectual debate? I can't just say I don't think these things should be allowed for this, that, and the other. That doesn't seem to be allowed by Facebook. But if you're saying I don't believe in this because I'm Christian, that's like some sort of blanket. And under their rules, it's because you can't criticize, somebody's religious beliefs. You can't criticize these protected groups, as they call them, or protected class, whatever they want to call them. Black people, white people, Christians, Muslims, all sort of things. They're protecting people based on their group status. And so it seems to be like just a non-denominational individual can't come in here and just say whatever they want. Social exclusion, which included denying access to spaces based on sex and gender, is actually allowed under the new guidelines. Denying access to spaces, physical and online, and social services is not allowed, except for sex and gender-based exclusion from spaces, communities limited by sex or gender, such as restrooms, sports and sports leagues, health and support groups, and specific schools. So they're now saying that you can say there should be only women's schools, only women's restrooms, only women's sports teams. Again, seems like they're just taking very specific things that Zuckerberg has been told by his new friends like Dana White and in the UFC. And I support this. It might sound like I'm against this, but it's just really strange that they've got these new policies that are around only very specific topics. At the same time, it continues, other basic allegations against individuals, including calling them cowards, dishonest, or sexually promiscuous, is not allowed. Meta has also made room for satirical content, a subject that has been a clear issue with left-leaning social platforms. If you recall, the Babylon Bee was banned from Twitter when it was under Jack Dorsey and Saudi Arabia and whatnot, and that was not allowed. They were kicked off of there for their satire. But certain content will be allowed to violate Meta's community standards if it is deemed satirical, but only if the content is being satirized or attributed to something or someone else in order to mock or criticize them. So I can't say, you're basically a donkey. I have to say, you're acting like this thing that's like a donkey. You're acting like one of these other things. I can't directly call you one of these things and have it be determined satirical, which of course is insane. They went on at the end of this policy rationale to say that if you're in Europe or a place with hate speech laws, you can, put forth a petition to get this stuff taken down, which of course is also insane. What they should do is say that Facebook and Meta are operated out of the United States. If you don't like it, then too bad. But these countries will fine them, and Facebook wants to be allowed in these countries. I don't think they would ever ban them, even if they abided by their own rules. Australia, Canada, these places are too weak. But then again, they did pass the thing up here in Canada about the news networks needing to be monetized by the platforms, and now they're blocked. So get yourselves a VPN, folks. NordVPN, ExpressVPN, whatever, Yahoo VPN, all these other things that are out there. You can do it, but watch out. Some of them actually work with the U.S. government, so it kind of renders it useless. So now, let's move on to this part that we're going to get to. Of course, here is the hateful conduct page if you're interested. Policy rationale. It's under the current version here. Transparency.meta.com/policies if you wish to view that stuff. Now let's see. Let's go back and see what Zuckerberg said on Joe Rogan just as a clip here.
They pushed us super hard to take down things that were honestly were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. And I was just like, well, we're not going to do that. Like, we're clearly not going to do that. I mean, that is kind of inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down things that
it was
that talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration. I think these people from the Biden administration.
So I think we all remember this stuff getting censored. So maybe they didn't remove it, but they completely shadow banned it, I guess, as some sort of penance. I don't know. Dave Portnoy says Zuckerberg's such a spineless jellyfish. Somebody from Biden's team, unnamed, told his team to take stuff down, so he rolled over. Trump gets elected, and suddenly he's a new man. That is the sentiment I'm hearing from a lot of people, and I tend to agree that while it's a good thing that this stuff is happening, people, and we're going to get to some more women's sports league banning transgenderism, Zuckerberg transitioning out of this, phase of censorship that they were obsessed with. COVID, lockdowns, Trump, Hunter Biden laptop story, all these other things. Either you're a pawn of the government or you're not, and so be it, you get shut down. Hopefully the people revolt a little bit in terms of demanding that you be allowed to publish things. But you can't just come back and say when Biden's done, and he addressed this on the podcast, you can't come back and say when Biden's done, oh, it was terrible and now we're never going to do that. No, the time to stand up is when it's happening, just like with lockdowns. And this is a big criticism for Pierre Poilievre up here in Canada. He waited till the very end until he was in a position to become the leader of the Conservative Party to start criticizing lockdowns. He didn't criticize things when they were happening. He didn't criticize the bank accounts. He didn't criticize the arrests, the COVID hotels. He didn't criticize that until the very end. And just like Zuckerberg's doing now that Biden's, 3 weeks from being gone at the time of the platform change, I believe. Now he's like, well, I never believed in that. We're going to change everything now. It's just become too much. All of a sudden, now that the Democrats aren't in charge, it's become too much. And what people are seeing, I think, for the first time, because it's been about 8 or 9 years now, of maybe even 10, of political discourse, of people, we can use the term red pill, waking up, all these sort of things, of paying attention. They've never seen such a flop, because what we went from pre-Trump was, liberalism, and then Trump comes in, and it's just like, no, this is the way. It has to be liberal. It has to be liberal up until 2020. And and Biden gets into office. And did he win? Who knows? Biden gets into office and it's like, that's right. Things should be liberal. Things should still be liberal. Things should still be liberal. And then we get to 2024. And everyone's like, hey, this is crazy. Things have gone way too far. The wall, transgenderism, trade, giving money away, taxes, all this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden, all these companies who fought for this stuff for 10 years, whether it's a sports agency, a social media platform, a newspaper, a school, all of a sudden they're just like, I guess maybe you guys were right all along. I guess maybe I was a little bit too harsh. No apologies. No being like, oh my God, I was so wrong. Zuckerberg didn't come out and say, oh my God, I've been so wrong this whole time, you guys. I shouldn't have been doing this. I've learned that I was censoring people. No, he's like, well, it was the Biden administration. I had no choice. I'm just a cajillionaire. Everybody's noticing that all these companies and these people are flip-flopping. They go with the wind. You could never take them seriously, and you can't take them seriously going forward. You can't take these brands going seriously that say, one day, transgenderism, A-OK, super cool, send your kids to the doctor. And the next day, they're like, this is disgusting. What have you done to it? It's a person who smoked. This is disgusting. I've been sitting here at Denny's listening to this for 9 years, and I've thought it was disgusting the whole time. I'm listening to Kid Rock now. They're all doing this, and everybody's taking note. So I'm glad people like Tim Pool are not buying it, because it takes big voices like Tim's to make sure we don't just bend over too quickly to these people.
Tim Pool, host of Timcast.
Timcast.
Are you buying the Zuckerberg transition?
I'm buying that he's a fair weather friend and that this is the path of least resistance. But hey, look, we're happy Trump won, so I'll take the power if he's shifting in this direction. But I think when you look at the Joe Rogan podcast and he talks about, they're yelling at us and they're forcing us to do these things, this only scratches the surface. Facebook built a portal for feds to log in to their company so they could flag misinformation. It has long been known, over a decade, that the federal government, the FBI, the CIA, I think the NSA, had backdoor access to Facebook as well as many other companies. So when Zuckerberg comes out and he's all, oh man, they were yelling at us and putting this pressure. We had no choice to do it. You're only saying that now because the news and the information got leaked over a long and hard-fought battle where activists, real journalists, were exposing them for having done this. Now they're giving us the light vanilla version of, they were just having us censor this COVID stuff. No. Let me ask you a question, Mark Zuckerberg. Eric Charamella, do you remember that name?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the guys involved in whistleblowing on Donald Trump for the false impeachment against him related to Ukraine. And there was a period where if you went on Facebook and typed that name in any context, they would delete it without notification, no warning, no rule violation. That is extreme censorship, because covering up that name hid a news story of historical significance. We can talk about the laptop. That affected an election, massively important.
And then Joe ended up pardoning his son for the laptop that was real that you got censored for talking about.
Yep.
When Joe Biden says, I could have won, how do you react to that?
Well, before we get to the rest of this clip, I want to point out that I hadn't watched that before I said what I said, and I guess I agree with Tim Pool. Now, he's exactly right. These guys, fair weather friend's a good way to put it. You can't just go out and be like, this is great now. This is a person who I guess is my best friend, and he's believed in me all along. It was just the censorship was too much. The pressure was too much from the Goobermant. No, this was a guy who said a long time ago that, especially on the J6ington, that Trump is a bad guy, that, all this stuff is happening because of Trump and he should have done more faster. This is a guy who decided that only places like the Daily Wire and the DNC and NBC and MSNBC and CBS and CNN, along with YouTube, these are people that decided these were authoritative sources. And you can't just be posting things and expect to get shown because we can't trust you. This has been at least 5 years of this, of these companies saying you are untrustworthy and nobody should you shouldn't have the extended reach these authoritative sources have. Like Brian Stelter, where is he? Chris Cuomo off the network. Don Lemon gone. You know who used to be on MSNBC? Along with Big Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski? What's the crazy guy's name? Down in his basement. I don't even remember his name, to be honest. He's got the crazy guy with glasses who's always yelling. There is so many insane people out there that you've forgotten about. The girl, New York Times girl. I'm forgetting these names now. There's so many people that have been on these networks that, you know, Kyle Kulinski was a respected guy. Anna Kasparian used to be insane compared to how she is now. This stuff is all come and gone over a decade. Remember the wannabe governor of Georgia? Do you remember the guy who almost won Florida, Andrew Gillum? Look up some of these names. Stacey Abrams never accepted losing the Georgia election. They put her on Star Trek as the president of Earth. All these people have come and gone, and it was mandated across the internet and all news platforms and all social media for nearly a decade that you comply with everything they're saying because you're a dumbass. And you don't know anything about science. You're a climate denier. The Amazon rainforests. Sweden says, according to John Oliver, Sweden says there are no no-go zones directly related to Tim Pool. And now, that was just Biden. We didn't say the same thing. We didn't say get quadruple boosted. We didn't say you shouldn't be allowed to go out. Do you remember de Blasio? Do you remember all these guys? Like all these people that said all these things for years, and now they're just like, just let us go back to normal, please.
What was he underwater, like 14 points in the internal polling?
They didn't show him that poll.
It's really remarkable and scary, though. If you're a Democrat, who do they have? They don't have anybody. They've been desperate to ice out anybody who could compete with their established order.
And they don't have Newsom anymore. Is Newsom salvageable at this point?
When that video came out and Newsom was asked by Anderson Cooper, where's the water? And he said, they're figuring it out. That said right there, Newsom said, I am the governor and I have no idea what's going on in my state.
That picture of him with his hands in his back pockets staring at the fire, he's toast.
The fire stuff hits me really personally. I have a lot of friends deeply affected by it, and I don't want to sound crass. I see these natural disasters happen in the country, the hurricanes, and I feel for these people. And this may sound a little selfish, but when I have family and friends that are living in those hills, and I don't know if they're alive or dead, it hits me twice as hard. And I know it shouldn't, but it is personal. So I get really offended by the callousness and the apathy coming from the government there.
Yeah, we need a federal takeover.
Shout out to Leo DeTavio, friends of the show, who is in a few minutes away from the fires. I hope he and Danny Mullen and crew are okay. How far have we come that Tim Pool's on Fox News in this hoodie and a beanie, though? I'd like to point out, I know Tim Pool's rich and famous, but it's still hilarious that we've pushed it this far in a good way. Controversial figure Ian Miles Chong also posted this, friend of the show as well. No matter what you think of Ian, he's always been nice to me. Zuckerberg removed the transgender theme from Facebook Messenger. Transgenderism is over, and they show that you can change it to a pride theme. A non-binary theme, which is interesting. Or lo-fi. Or you could, go sour with Olivia Rodrigo. I'm not sure exactly who she is. Is she the one that was selling giving away abortion pills? I'm not sure. I could be smearing her. Conjecture, not submissible in court, Your Honor, but go with lo-fi anyway. Non-binary's got some cool colors. I mean, don't clip that. All that will be used against me. All right, let's move on to our next topic. I was talking earlier about how all these different places are backtracking on everything, and there's a couple sports leagues that did this. One being the Women's Field Hockey League in England. First, there was the LPGA who did it. The Women's Tennis Association in England did it. And it's weird how England is like, you can't be mean, or else you're going to jail if you say bad things on social media. They also say, saying men shouldn't be in women's sports might get you arrested in England, but then they're also far ahead on this sort of topic compared to many places in the United States and Canada. It's really strange. So they've banned men from women's field hockey in England, but they keep doing these things in a little bit of a roundabout way. And I'll tell you what I mean at the end, because, like I said, the LPGA and the Tennis Association in the United Kingdom, they make these rules, but it's also done almost like in a groveling manner. Like, we're still wrong, but we don't want to be beaten by men anymore. Field hockey governing body has seemingly created a clever workaround in order to get men out of women's sports. It is called, I guess, just England Hockey, which is confusing to many of us. They've implemented a female category and an open category, but no category for men. So the idea here is that if you're a woman, only you can go in the female category. But if you think you're a woman, or you're non-binary, as Facebook will still allow you to identify as, you can go in the men's category if you're a man. So it'll eventually just be only men. Obviously, transgender people aren't the greatest athletes. They've got a lot more going on in their life, not exactly 80 hours a week to dedicate to a sport. And then if you're non-binary, you're just even... Are you more confused than a transgender person, or you're just checking out? I think non-binary just equates to, in Latin, checking out. I don't want to... It tends to be women who don't want to look feminine anymore, maybe think something's happened to them. You don't see too many of the men who say they're non-binary, because that doesn't win you as many points. A non-binary girl thing is sort of like being like, I'm not a lesbian, but please treat me like one, but also I don't want to be pretty. It's confusing. It's a confusing time for us all. This effectively forces all biological men into the open division to ensure the women's sport is unaffected. England Hockey recognizes that this is an evolving landscape of both policy and research, that societal attitudes are ever changing. You see, they're basically saying we're blowing with the wind. Based on current available evidence, in that hockey requires the physical capabilities of strength, endurance, speed, and acceleration as key factors, hockey is considered a gender-effective sport. Based on this evidence, which can be found in our policy, we have determined that the trans and non-binary participation policy should restrict trans participation in order to secure fair competition. You see how I'm saying, like, this is still written by a woman who doesn't want to be mean to anybody? So they have to pretend. They have to make up all this stuff around it. The short version is, men have an advantage. We don't want to have to play against them because it's not fair. The long version is, we've decided based on societal and governmental factors, and we've done 13 keynote speeches and scientific studies to prove that people with it's turning into William Shatner. People with penises have some sort of advantage. Just say you don't want men in the sport. Everybody's fine with it. The policy will go into effect on September 1st, but all previous guidance is in place until then. The group said it launched a review in July 2023 and sought guidance from the Sports Council Equality Group of England. So you needed a year and a half to tell you that men have an advantage. Like, think of the hard science that was going on there. You just get men sprinting against women. Field hockey playing men versus field hockey playing women, or just soccer players. I don't know. You see who can hit the ball harder, and just every single time. I just like the retarded science that's going on here to prove this must have been laughable. Imagine doing this in baseball. Who can throw harder? Who can hit harder? Who's going to run faster to the first base? Craziness. At the same time, and this is what I talk about when I mean they're apologetic, England Hockey provides a plethora of resources that actually align with transgender ideology and seemingly act as paragraphs upon paragraphs of apologetic, like manuscripts, essentially, that a list of terms, a page of terms, which I'll bring up for you. They're definitions and useful terms. Gender identity, a person's sense of self as a man, woman, non-binary person, or other sense of gender, including no gender. Did you know that you don't have a gender if you don't want one? Did you know that that's a thing? You're just born with a blank slate. You're the gray aliens, the small grays. Person's gender may match the sex they were recorded at birth or may be different. Basically, what they're saying here is we have no idea what we're talking about based on anything else, but actually there's a difference between men and women when it comes to sports. So they want to be able to agree. I'm going to put this pen down for the audio listeners so I'm not clicking. They want to be able to agree with everything transgender people say so they don't have to hurt their feelings. But then they go and kind of spit in their faces when they say, actually, you can't play with us. You're awesome. Everything you say makes sense. You're actually a real woman. But actually, by the way, you're not when it comes to sports. Hey, your lack of a penis might mean you're a man. Who am I to say that? If you get it removed, you're probably a woman. Who am I to judge this? But also, you can't play with us. You're not actually a woman. Sorry, Bernice. I don't know what the name would be. A trans boy and a trans man have good definitions. But the definition of transphobia is interesting because it's wrong. People who are deliberate in their behavior aimed at disrespecting a transgender person's identity or expressing irrational fears about transgender people is considered transphobia. Of course, disrespecting somebody doesn't mean you're afraid of them. Expressing irrational fears would be afraid of them, but you really changed it when you just say deliberate behavior aimed at disrespecting a person means fear. It's a colloquial term that's been made up because how can you have a fear of a person that, like, you can have a fear of a transgender person, a person who gets a surgery to try to represent themselves as a different thing, but there's no actual transgender person. Like, we're all in agreement in that. Like, you're still like, and so is the sports league here. You're still a guy, even if you believe you are. Sorry, everybody. And then, like, are you ghost phobic? Assuming ghosts, let's give Andrew the benefit of the doubt and assume ghosts don't exist for a second. Can you be afraid of something that doesn't exist? I guess. But when you make up this term to say any sort of criticism against it is therefore a phobia, that doesn't make sense. And this whole entire page that they're saying doesn't make sense. If I'm deliberately saying that you're not a woman and it's just determined to be disrespectful, that would be transphobic under their guidelines here, but also at the same time, you're saying that they can't play on your team. What the hell? On a page titled How to Support Trans and Non-Binary Participants, which will also open up for you, they inform athletic directors that you shouldn't tell a child's parents if they're feeling like they're different gender. Are we going to get censored on Spotify for this again? We got censored on Spotify for it before, or at least a community note, community guidelines. I'll tag some Joe Rogan and stuff in it next time if we get the old X on our profile. Parents and carers can be reassured that hockey promotes a zero tolerance policy towards bullying and discrimination. Blah, blah, blah. The confidentiality of the young person is placed at the forefront of our priorities. If the young player is happy to disclose their identity to parents or carers and the club, then they can be rest assured that the utmost care and confidentiality will be given to the player whilst the club supports them and makes their hockey experience as positive as possible. So don't tell their parents. It's important to have a conversation with them to ascertain whether they have disclosed their gender identity to their parents or carers. Discussing a young person's trans status with their parents or carers without their prior consent would constitute a breach of confidentiality. Some young members may feel anxious about disclosing their identity to their parents or carers, so it's imperative not to disclose any information without obtaining their explicit consent beforehand. First of all, they're stupid kids. They don't get to decide who tells me what, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not your psychiatrist. There's no expectation of privacy for things that you tell your coach. Okay, did you break your ankle? Your coach can tell your parents. Do you believe you're a woman? Your coach could tell your parents. Do you believe that you're actually a ghost haunter for the Pokemon? Your coach can tell your parents. All these sorts of things that just arbitrarily make up here, and at the same time, at the end of the day, somehow they're saying they shouldn't be allowed to play with them. They agree with every single thing, and all of a sudden they're just like, We don't believe men should play with women. But here are all these other crazy opinions they have that contradict them. Now, this follows the Lawn Tennis Association, Britain's governing body for tennis, who decided in December to bar transgender women from playing in the top women's tournaments. The Ladies Professional Golf Association, also known as the LPGA, said the same thing, but they said only athletes who are assigned female at birth are eligible for competitions, including the following. And the LPGA said that if you didn't go through male puberty, which is insane to be like, you're a boy, but we're going to stop your puberty from happening, you could still play with the women. So if for some reason somebody took you to a doctor at 11 years old and said, we're not going to put you through male puberty, stomach's growling. Pardon me. Then you're still allowed to play in the LPGA. That's weird. Isn't it? So a bunch of these corporations and these companies, sports leagues, they're all changing their tune. I guess you could say it couldn't come soon enough, but you just can't forgive them. You just can't forget, and you just can't put any stock into them the next time they say something crazy. If Mountain Dew comes out and says, it's very cool for your kid to go out and throw snowballs at disabled people, are you gonna? And you say that's crazy. And then Mountain Dew, conjecture, this isn't real, Your Honor. This is an example. And this soda company goes out and says this is the best thing for your kids to do for the next 10 years. And they fight really hard. Soda company X is fighting really hard for your children to throw snowballs at disabled people. Wow, this will be clipped wildly out of context. And they say for 10 years, you got to believe this. You're a bigot. You're a transphobe. You're a snowball phobe if you don't believe it. And then after 10 years, when Trump Jr. wins an election or Tucker Carlson is president, they say, wait a minute. We never really believed. It was wrong of us to believe that your kids should do this. You can't just be like, oh, I guess that's fine. You can't just say, oh, maybe they're just coming to their senses. Maybe it won't be the Biden administration. Maybe the Cardi B administration forced them to do it. So it's not Mark Zuckerberg Jr. Mark Zuckerberg's transgender robotic son. It's not his fault. He's the one running Meta. The robo dogs and the robo cops. It's not their fault. They were just doing what they were told by Vice President Whoopi Goldberg. Vice President Sorry, I'm trying to work this out as we go along. Vice President Whoopi Goldberg said that throwing snowballs at disabled Republicans was A-okay with me for 10 years. And now President Cardi B is finally out of office. So we can't push that ideology anymore. It's not my fault. Don't believe them when they say that. Don't do it, bud. Okay? And we're going to close out on a story related to the UFC. I figured out the mouse thing, by the way. I have to go really slow when I go off the screen. It's involving Andrew Tate and a UFC fighter. And the UFC fighter's name is Peyton Talbot. He's 7-0. He's got a black dot tattooed on his chest. And he hates Andrew Tate. So I'm going to bring up a couple things here. Bear with me. And if you're one of these people that say Andrew Tate is just an awesome kickboxer. So Andrew Tate was about, I think he was 1-0 in MMA. This was a long time ago also. He fought in kickboxing in 2020. Hadn't fought since 2012. He's 3-1 in kickboxing in no significant leagues. So this idea that he was some sort of badass fighter, it's just not true. I was never a professional fighter. Disclosure alert. I was good as a teenager, not a professional. Couple championships, couple tournament golds, not a big deal, young Andrew. But older Andrew Tate, he was not in any professional, yes, but this idea that he was like some big name in MMA or kickboxing even, not true at all. Just a side note there. This MMA fighter named Peyton Talbot doesn't like him. Peyton Talbot is a UFC fighter who's 7-0. and he is an up-and-comer. I think he's 3 or 4-0 in the UFC. And he's a little bit of a weird guy. He's a strange apple. He does pole dancing. I'll bring that up for you right now. He does pole dancing. He defends it. He says he doesn't like most of the UFC fans because, they try to put him in a box. I don't really like a lot of the MMA fan base because they're trying to put me in a box, and they can't put me in a box. I'm not going to let them put me in a box. They're trying to put me in a box. I'm not going to let them put me in a box. We used to have Native Americans, black people putting me in boxes. Now it's illegal immigrants trying to put me into boxes. We're not allowing that. Not going to happen. So he was asked about the pole stuff in regards to pole dancing because there was pole dancing videos of him online. And he wants us to believe that this isn't gay. He wants us to believe that that's the sound of it. He wants us to believe that this isn't weird, that he's pole dancing. Getting blown back by the audio here. He wants us to believe that it's not weird. He said fans are not sure what to make of it. Could I ask, when you see negative reactions, how does that make you feel? Ariel Helwani asked him, Peyton Talbot said in response, I don't really like a lot of the MMA fan base. I don't do those things out of spite for people, but I think it's hard for people when they see somebody that they can't box into their own parameters that they're used to. They come up with a word they feel they can box them into. I think it's really hard for MMA fans to put me in a box, and I hope so. I'm very hard to box in. A lot of times they say that's like gay. They say he's a gay dude, or he's zesty, or he's this, or he's that. I just think people have a really hard time characterizing me into this identity of a fighter. Hopefully, maybe someday that changes what the expectations of a fighter are. We're just not mules that go out there and beat the ass out of each other. We're people with actual hobbies. He then went on to say, and you can watch his interview if you'd like, that his mother and his sister taught him how to pole dance. And even though they're not strippers, we would never devalue strippers either. So you've got a guy who pole dances. He's also a very good fighter who says it's not gay to dance on poles. It's not weird, even though his sister and his mother taught him how to pole dance. But also, we don't want to denigrate strippers either, you guys. Quit trying to box them in. It's normal for a UFC fighter to be taught pole dancing by his mother and his sister. And they're not denigrating strippers, okay, when they say that they're not strippers. They wish they didn't say this. They wish they could be strippers, but they're not going to denigrate strippers either, okay? He's just a guy who's pole dancing on Fridays, fighting on Sundays. It's usually the other way around. Pole dancing on Fridays, fighting on Saturdays. Nothing weird about it. Nothing weird about pole dancing with my sister and my mom. Nothing weird about that. And you're just trying to box him in. So that's the backstory on Peyton Talbot. And now he says that he doesn't like Andrew Tate, and he kind of wants to have a fight with him, which he would win, by the way. He would easily beat Andrew Tate in a fight. The problem is Andrew Tate's way bigger than him, so there'd be a bit of disadvantage. But if they met at like 160, Peyton Talbot fights at 135, which means he probably walks around at 150. If they met at 155 somehow, 160, he'd beat Andrew Tate. But he could probably still beat him with grappling, I would imagine.
And after Barcelos, perhaps Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
That's the one you want.
Yeah, let's get that going.
You want that, huh?
I'd take that.
I saw you said it's Tate and Goggins. Those are the guys on your hit list.
Yeah, just a free for all.
You versus both of them. Why do you hate Tate so much?
Man, he's just like the antithesis of me.
He is.
It's like what I said in that video. It just seems like somebody cheated on him when he was younger, and now he has this vendetta against women. I feel like he takes himself super seriously, and is just like he's kind of a poison for masculine culture.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people would agree.
A poison for masculine culture. I don't think it was smart of him to say, here's it. Like obviously this is a silly post. Andrew Tate says, where he says women aren't loyal, women aren't virgins, and women don't listen. They broke the deal. Give a man a loyal blah blah blah. Men didn't change, women did. And then Peyton Talbot says, I hate this guy in response, but saying you're the antithesis of Andrew Tate isn't a good thing. So let's take the colloquial definition or viewpoint of Andrew Tate: misogynistic, sexist, whatever. Like, I don't know if I don't know that for a fact. What I do know is that he ran like a webcam farm essentially out of a house of a bunch. That, like, I don't know if any of his crimes convicted or the things he's charged with are true. But what I do know, and I doubt a lot of them are true. I don't know. I don't have an opinion either way. But what I do know is he had like a webcam farm, essentially, a bunch of women doing nudie stuff in his house. Not very good quality. And a lot of the stuff he says is kind of silly. Other than that, would I be like, he's the worst person in the world? No, I wouldn't. I'm going to get killed for saying this, for sure. But I just don't care, right? Like, why do I... you know what I'm saying. And then Peyton Talbot, if you're going to take his definition of him, a poison to masculinity, a toxin, a really bad guy, and he's saying the antithesis of it, of the super sexist whatever guy, misogynist guy, that means you're way over on the other side. If he's all the way over here, that means you're way the hell over here, and you're like borderline gay, weird, too feminine. If he's too like overwhelmingly and cringily masculine, sexist, and too misogynistic or something, then that would mean you're extremely feminine, way too in favor of things that are girly, and give women the benefit of the doubt when they possibly don't deserve it. So you're being the other extreme isn't good either. So that's weird that you would say like he's the antithesis of you. It would have to be closer to the middle. But I think what he's trying to say is like, I'm the good guy. I'm against all these things that he's for, and therefore I'm a good guy and I should be more reputable and respectable, and I am. But this isn't true, Peyton Talbot. I'm sorry, and I know you can probably kick my ass, but you're pretty young intellectually here, and the idea that people think it's weird of you to do pole dancing with your mom and your sister and to respect strippers and say, like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely cool. It's one thing to say, like, I don't care about strippers, but it's the other thing to say, I would never denigrate them. You're going to learn eventually that people judging you on this stuff is normal. That's what's normal. It's not normal to just do something extremely unordinary and then criticize people who are having a problem with it. If I go out in the street in wintertime, -20 or whatever, and I'm wearing shorts, and I'm just like, how dare you think it's weird of me to dress in shorts and a t-shirt in this weather? You're trying to box me in, man. No, that's weird of you to say that it's strange for people to have a problem with that. Do you get what I'm saying? If you put mayonnaise on your pizza and you're just like, well, you're trying to box me in, bro, that's weird of you. It's not irregular for people to point that out and say, hey, that's a strange thing for people to do. It's not strange for people to point out that pole dancing with your mommy and your sissy is not a strange thing to do. Or is not a normal thing to do. It's not weird for people to point that out. That's the lesson of Unauthorized Opinions today. Sorry for my stomach grumblings, audio listeners. Thank you for putting up with the extra screens. But the lesson for today is it's not strange for people to point out that a man doing pole dancing with his mother and his sister is strange. That's not weird. Unauthorized Opinions.